In less than 24 hours, Washington, D.C., at the behest of a man on the right who has never stood for a presidential election, is going to use the U.S. military to invade, without any authorization for the use of military force, a sovereign nation based on a lie of the need for humanitarian aid. He will do so in collusion with a criminal on the left, a man who stood for an election as senator to the state of Florida, who is now absent without any official authorization to be so. Can we do anything about that out here? No, we can't. But what we can do is we can tell the truth, and we can tell the truth every single day. Now, I'm going to start someplace today that probably would surprise a lot of people. We're going to start by quoting Mr. Rush Limbaugh himself. See, one of the big arguments, if not the biggest argument, about Venezuela versus the United States is, well, golly, if the Venezuelans had just been free market capitalists just like we are, we wouldn't be in this problem. And I'm going to use a quote that Mr. Limbaugh uses on his show all the time, and anybody out there who's listened will be able to verify this. His quote, "I always say my real purpose is to attract the largest audience I can and hold it for as long as I can, so I can charge confiscatory advertising rates." Basically what he's saying is that I'm going to do the very best job I can doing what I do best so that I can make the maximum amount of money possible on the open market, period. That is the basic fundamental tenet of capitalism. And that's perfectly fine. Unless, of course, you are a Latin American country. And I'm going to explain this. Now, many of you are probably like, well, wait a minute, they control the prices. They don't charge as much as they can. Well, yeah, they do. See, they have a very different view of the resources in their country. They don't see the resources as just tools to enrich individuals to insane levels. They have a basic fundamental concept that says, as a government, our job is to make sure that everyone has access to the basic needs of life. And to that end, there are 50 products that the Venezuelan government has told these big grocery store chain owners that they can not charge more than XYZ price for. Now, anything else, anything goes. So here was the game. And when you get done hearing what I'm about to tell you, you're probably going to have a very different view of how things work in Latin America. So any grocery store owner, any business owner knows when their most busy times are, and they know what their most popular products are. So here in America, they kind of push prices up a little bit at busier times and maybe put other things on sale to kind of make up for it. We have laws in this country that prohibit the gouging of prices during busy times. There are no such laws in Venezuela, Argentina, Panama, Colombia, down there. You can charge pretty much whatever you want, unless, of course, you're in Venezuela. Now, these business owners, these people that own the grocery store chains, they're a very tiny group of people. They live in Miami. Venezuela is a tiny country. It's only got 30 million people, size of Texas, roughly. So, when Chavez came to power and said, I am going to do things for the poor, I am going to make sure that everyone participates in the economy, these people didn't like that at all. They wanted to be able to charge whatever the hell they wanted, whenever the hell they wanted, and gouge whoever they wanted. See, that's what they would do. They would take a product off the shelf, one of the more popular ones, and when people came to buy it, they would say, darn Chavez, he didn't order enough and we don't have it and he's such a screw up and a doofus but I'll let you, give me your number, I'll let you know when it comes in. Now they would collude to do this. All of the chains. Couldn't be found anywhere. So people would come back on that date when it came in, but they would notice something. The price was 20, 25% more. And they would go to the shop owner and say, well, wait a minute. That's not the normal price for this. It's like, well, yeah, but I don't know when I'm going to get it back in next, even though the entire time it's been hidden in the back room. So I have to make sure that I have enough to cover. And, the government's charging me so much at evil Chavez, fomenting insurrection. And so they would do this over 8 or 10 or 12 products. Well, this worked so magnificently that organized crime got involved in it. And they came to these business owners and said, you know what? We'll give you 30% over, but you never put it on the shelf. And when people start asking for it, you send them to us. And of course, organized crime being what it is, that's what happened. And so these basic staple products, we're not talking about ketchup. We're not talking about things you can do without. We're talking soap, shampoo, the flour they use down there to make arepas, basic staple food that the poor would buy. And so the poor, being uneducated and uninformed, when they were apprised of the situation, and the shop owner said, yeah, it's Chavez's fault. It's Chavez. Boy, I'd like to have it on the shelf here, but I just don't know if I can't afford it, and it's never going to come in. But you know what? I know a guy. He gets it in Colombia. They're this wonderful pro-U.S. place, and they always have goods. But, it's a little bit more expensive, because of Chavez. And if people need it, they'll go buy it. And so they would. And you saw the pictures of people walking back across that bridge in Cucuta with soap, shampoo, toilet paper, all this kind of stuff. Things that people absolutely need. And of course the U.S. comes out and says, oh, look at all the people leaving. Oh, look at all the shortages and the empty spots in the grocery stores. It's because Chavez is evil and it's terrible and he's poor people. We need to go in and give them aid. That's what this is about. And Maduro saying enough is enough with this bullshit. This is what's called speculation and hoarding. Because when people would buy this stuff, they'd buy all of it at whatever price these grocery store chains would charge. With false, fake shortages to drive the price of things up so that they could blame the government for the problem. Now, that by itself probably wouldn't have caused the huge economic shock. The government could have dealt with that. They could have gone in and they could have walked into the back room, basically put the stuff on the shelf and said, this guy's been lying to you, arrest him and put him in jail. And this happened quite a bit, actually. But sometimes these things had sat in the back for so long that they had expired. And then, of course, the U.S. gets to come out and say, look at the government of Venezuela giving expired, horrible, terrible food to the people. This is what they do. This is their game. So that they can get rid of governments down there they don't like. That's how a black market always works. You find something that the people absolutely will pay anything for, or they absolutely have to buy, and you own them. You control the means of production, you control the outlets, the transportation, and you control the media and the story. This is what's happened in Venezuela. This is what this whole crap about, oh, we just want to help the people of Venezuela. They created the problem, meaning Washington, D.C. And they used thuggery and criminal tactics to do it. Now, you might ask yourself a question, well, why does the government have to be involved in the importing of food to begin with? That's another great question. The reason has to do with something called expropriation. You see, they don't believe that the making of giant controlling billionaires is something that's in the interest of the people. We had this horrible, terrible, evil socialist expropriator named Dwight D. Eisenhower that expropriated a whole bunch of land for this interstate system that's made Jeff Bezos rich. But we could talk about the farmland issue all day long. But what was happening down there is this. Large multinationals had come in and bought this land up and were leaving it set fallow in order to force the government of Venezuela to import food. Because you can't force a landowner to do anything with his land, because the minute you start doing that, then they go to their friends in the media and say, oh, look at the government coming in and tell me what I got to do, and this kind of crap. They expropriated the land, meaning Chavez and Maduro, and gave it to the poor. Let me find that picture real quick here. There you go. One of the big knocks on Hugo Chavez was this expropriation of land from the rich and giving that land to the poor so that they could start colectivos on it and actually use it for farmland, so that Venezuela could start becoming self-sufficient food-wise and wouldn't be so slaved to imports. But this has all been a game that has been going on very, very long in Latin America, and it's not just Venezuela. This is just the latest case of it. I'm going to give you guys a link. It's called The History of Cuban-American Relations. It's kind of a generalized title because it talks about Nicaragua, it talks about Venezuela, it talks about Panama, it talks about everything that's gone on over the last, 200 and something odd years. Pretty much the founding of our country. And there's information here I think that would stun a lot of you. We had a senator that referred to Cubans as childlike people that can't be trusted to govern themselves. And there were terrorists on our payroll called Omega 7 that were specifically coordinated to destroy the sugar industry in Cuba. I'm sure many of you know the story of the Maine. Everybody knows about the Bay of Pigs. Everybody knows about the Panama Canal, what happened with Noriega. But this is pretty comprehensive. It goes from 1791 all the way to present day. And I'll let you guys read it. But the reason I started with Rush is this. What those grocery store owners were doing would have made Rush Limbaugh proud. Because what's the idea? Get the maximum amount for your item that you can sell using any tactics possible that are legal. It's the same thing that the U.S. cries and pisses and moans and whines about with OPEC. Because Venezuela, Ecuador, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, all these countries were working together, colluding together, to drive up the price of oil. Well, it's their oil, right? And they can produce however much they want or however much they don't want, right? Charge however much they want. It's their thing, right? Isn't that what capitalism says? If it's your thing and you're bringing it to market, you can charge whatever you want for it, whatever people will buy for it. In North America, when it's Rush Limbaugh, it's great and fantastic and wonderful. But if it's a place like Iran, Iraq, or Saudi Arabia, or Venezuela, or Cuba, or Bolivia, then it's evil, terrible, and horrible, and they're so anti-American. This is the lie. This is the game. The U.S. acts as if Washington, D.C. acts as if it's playing on a level playing field, when it has literally skewed the entire market of the world in a very socialist way, ironically, saying who can and who can't make deals with the Venezuelan government, what banks are prohibited criminally under these sanctions from extending loans to Venezuela or dealing with this government or dealing with that government. If the free market is such a great thing and capitalism is the savior of the world, then why is the U.S. government in D.C. interjecting itself and involving itself in very specific ways to create havoc? Because they have a narrative. And to my audience that already understands this, my apologies for having to do the rehash. But I thought it was important today, given that we're in the last day before this happens, to illustrate directly why there are food shortages of certain types in Venezuela, in certain areas, and what caused it. And that it wasn't socialism that caused it. It was an unending amount of greed from some very, very wealthy people in a place called Westenzuela, right here in Miami. I'm just going to leave it there because we're at 16 minutes. There's a lot more I could say. I'll give you guys the links. If you have any questions, please ask. Like, share, subscribe. Pray for the people of Venezuela and our servicemen. Like, share, subscribe.